Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Kirby Superstar Ultra. In the last part we continued our way through Great Cave Offensive, getting through the old tower segment, and now we're in the garden, the final quarter of the Great Cave Offensive. And probably if you just rush through it, barring Old Tower the shortest, similarly to the Crystal area, there's going to be 3 pathways coming up. Only the one in the center actively leads to the minecart and the end of Great Cave. But the 2 side paths are not only where a lot of the treasure are, they're a lot longer than the ones in Crystal. But we actually have our first chest right here. Well, actually, it's our second chest overall. And it's kind of an annoying one to get. The best way to get to it is to use the ninja's down kick by pressing the attack button and down in midair, because that resists the wind's push. You can also get over there using the jet boost, but jet generally gets affected by the wind more. Now, we've already actually seen our first new item for the part. The gold watering can we got while I was doing the intro. That was the wintertime heart in the original Kirby Superstar, but here in Ultra it's the gold watering can, which is a distinct reference to the hidden item in the Animal Crossing games. Cute? Yes. Big change? No, besides I think it's worth less, but it ultimately doesn't matter because the worth of the items is just to kind of tally up to the overall score. Now, I know I said that I'm going to be doing a lot of jump cutting in Old Tower, and it's still overall going to be where most of it is for this particular subsection of the LP. But there's a couple of items, particularly on this path, I have to just come back to get. Like, you can actually fall through that particular waterfall there to get to an item. And I need a fire ability to reach another item over here, so we're going to be coming back here down the line. In the meanwhile, though, let's talk about a little interesting tidbit about Superstar. It might be a Super Nintendo game to start, but it actually started development on the NES. Apparently Sakurai likes to do that for some games to help with prototyping ideas. And this was proven by showing off some NES-styled Kirby sprites for Cutter and Yo-Yo. For testing animations and what would work out well with that. And I just think that's really cool. Usually whenever a game starts development on one console and then gets put off to another, the original game's ideas, barring some aesthetics, tend to get left by the wayside, if not just make an outright sequel instead of porting the project forward. I'm looking immediately at Earthbound/Earthbound 0 when I'm talking about this. So it's cool to just have some proof of them starting on something and then just fully transitioning over to new hardware. I think more than basically any other field, barring maybe like filmmaking, that games just have such interesting development stories. And it makes me look forward to any of my friends who are in the game design major, like, putting out a lot of games here and there. If they can find a job in the field, or make their own job, that is, because that shit's hard to do. Like, the most successful one when it comes to that is probably my friend Tris, who is now on the Game Explain team, but that's a whole different can of worms. So this section of the area, you're really going to want Wing, because Wing not only is good for platforming, but it allows you to break open blocks above you with your jump, which is useful to get that shiny bamboo there, which I believe is supposed to be a reference to the Tale of Kaguya? If it's not, I don't know. Also, this particular portion of garden is where you can see me kind of faffing about, kind of forgetting where I'm going. Like I mentioned earlier, again, Great Cave Offensive is like the only part of the game I didn't really practice and was going mostly off memory off of, which was probably for the worst, but oh well. Also, the Cog's barrel item, I think what that's a reference to is pretty on the tin. That is in both versions of the game, by the way. By and large, we're past a lot of the completely changed items. Moving forward, any of the name changes are entirely just to retranslate something. Like, for instance, one of the later items goes from the old way that translators used to translate a particular mythical metal to the correct way it's meant to be translated. We got a little bit of an annoying wheel puzzle here, though. You gotta correctly time yourself getting over here, and the best way to do that is to fall down into that little crevice there, and then jump over the hill. And I went over to Wheelie Rider, which I brought up earlier in the LP just because I was having trouble doing it. Wheelie Rider, I believe, by default, moves a little faster than normal wheel. So, cool. I might be completely bullshitting that, but it definitely feels like it is. And this is Sleep. I didn't mean to grab it, but here we are. It's adorable, but does nothing. I swear I remember there being some version of it that also, like, restored your health, but I think I'm completely making that up in the back of my mind. Because maybe young me tried to think there was some benefit to Sleep, but no, there's really not. Gonna want to have Parasol for this room, though, to get this particular treasure, as this is the first room of a couple that the game has where they just continuously spawn star blocks, kind of like the green stage in Melee. And Parasol can prevent those from falling on your head and damaging you, which is pretty handy. It's one of the few times Parasol actually acts like a Parasol in the series. I know I brought up the idea of a Kirby RPG earlier in the LP, but I feel like Great Cave Offensive could be an interesting thing to have in there, because it could either function like the item worlds in a Disgaea game, or like the little, I forget what other games have this kind of feature, but the repaired machine missions in Mega Man X Command Mission, where you repair some enemy machines and you send them off to go collect some extra money items, sometimes find some rare keys to access some super bosses and stuff. I feel this could be a fun thing to have on the side with that, as long as it was, like, relatively consistent with what caused what to happen in it. Because that was the problem with that weird Command Mission minigame. Sometimes it just took a while for the super boss keys to spawn, for literally no reason besides luck. Alright, we're technically done with that route, but I need to go back through there with Jet in order to actively get the last two treasures that are on that side. Whoops. But it happens. Something else I think they could revisit from Great Cave Offensive, though, in a future 3D Kirby game, now that we've gotten Forgotten Land, is kind of use the treasures as a literal money source for shops and stuff, but have it function like either the Knuckles stages in the Sonic Adventure duology, or the Wario Land / Wario World games, where you have a little radar, little optional side challenges to find them and such. That could be pretty cool. Because Kirby's default moveset, I find, can work for explorative stuff, but the lack of permanent power-ups or distinct puzzle rooms for everything does feel a little inconsistent. I think Kirby's movesets in general work best not for explorative type stuff, but for an action pace that is closer to either Dynablade or the 6th mini-campaign, where there's a slower pace than, say, Mega Man or Sonic or even Mario in some cases. But the levels have enough going on in them that you're always having to use his moveset. Because that's something I do genuinely like about Kirby. I think they use more of his learned set consistently than, say, Sonic does or Mario. Because there's going to be times where you're going to need to fly, there's going to be times where you're going to need to slide through enemies, and every single power usually gets some use either for side content or just trying to actually survive. Like, you can play most Sonic games without having to actively use the spin dash or the insta-shield. Mario games, most of what you're doing there is just jumping. Donkey Kong is probably the series that ended up adapting to the idea of using every ability you got to your best, starting with the retro games. With Returns and Returns, Tropical Freeze. But even then, like, with all my problems with the weird, not inconsistency, but love of having gimmicks that Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3 have, they use every single ability you got to its best. At this point in Garden, though, things get pretty linear moving forward. Not much to worry about when it comes to finding chests, either directly in your path or direct enough that it's not a big problem to try to find them. The real big issue is if you realize, especially in the original game, you missed a treasure somewhere along the line. You have to go look for it. Sure, the treasures are always in the same spot, so you never need to worry about, like, oh, I'm missing one here, but it's this one, so it could be here, here, or here. It's like, okay, I'm missing the tire. The tire is always in the same place. The big problem in that case is actually just having to backtrack to go find it. Like, say, if I missed one all the way back in Crystal, I'd have to go all the way back there. If you missed one in Subtree, you don't have to worry too much, but it's missing one in, like, Crystal or Old Tower at this point. That is a bit of a trek back. Well, that's not what I need at all. We need to use Crash in order to actually open up this door, which is something I like to do here and there in the game. If only just to make sure you actually use it here and there. I give Crash a bit of a bad rap just because it's a one and done. It does do a lot of damage, even to boss fights. But the one and done nature just makes it very lackluster to me. Orichalcum, that's the one that got a different translation here in the DS version. It's the old Orichalcon name that they used a lot back in the 90s in the original Superstar. Alright, time for us to head towards the end, and both of the final treasures are actually in these next two rooms. You do need Cutter to get one of them, and I want to say they added a Mr. Kibble in this room in Ultra, but I might be thinking of a room back in Subtree now that I think about it further. So, could theoretically be more useful, but it's not too much of a problem all the same. Great Cave Offensive, though, reminds me of a comment that I read on I think a soundtrack video of the game while I was, like, considering doing LPs for it. And it made me realize that they were right. Great Cave Offensive might actually be the chillest out of all of the mini campaigns in the game. If not in the entire franchise, even, because there's no real direct villain in it. There's bosses and enemies, but they're sort of vibing, doing their own thing here. They just don't want Kirby in their space. And you know what? Given how quickly he can fuck things up, that's not too surprising. I appreciate that little angle for it. Alright though, here is one of the last rooms of Great Cave, the Spring Room. Touching one of these will rocket you back up to the top, except for the one down here at the very bottom, which just prevents you from getting the last chest for a moment. Quickly float down, and we can find ourselves at the most obvious crossover item of all, the Triforce. The fact that the Triforce is apparently only, what is that, $8,000 or something? 80K? That's kind of inexpensive. But now we're on to the final boss for the campaign. This is Wham Bam Rock, whose design was notably changed for Superstar Ultra from the original Superstar. There's sprites of it online, but the best way I can describe it is the same caricature of a certain group of people that Mr. Popo is in a lot of ways. But the fight itself is sort of a prototype for Master Hand. He can cause rocks to fall from the ceiling, he can try to slam down his fist on you in a couple ways, he can make rocks rain down from his actual fingers, and he can try to grab you to do some big damage on top of punches. Hard? Not exactly. But it can be a bit complicated compared to all the other fights you've done in Great Cave, so if you did this campaign earlier on for some reason, might have some problems with it. But overall, not a lot to write home about. If anything, that'll come into another fight down the line that's only in Superstar Ultra. And there we go. With that said, while the final boss is down, you're not technically out of the woods yet. We got one last minecart section with, I think, a couple of enemies who could theoretically kill you. I think it'd be kind of funny in concept to get a game over in this room instead of on Wham Bam Rock, but not a lot to worry about here. Now, you might be looking at the mini-map down there at the bottom right and wondering, well, that's the end of the map. What's after this minecart section? Technically nothing. We got an elevator room that has a kind of familiar tile set to other parts of Great Cave, and as we go upwards even more through this door, it looks especially familiar. We are now back at the start of Subtree. We've looped back. If you missed any items earlier on, you can go back and get them, but for me, we're just gonna leave. That's Great Cave Offensive. It's inoffensive, but it doesn't exactly interest me as much as a lot of the other mini-campaigns do. Like I brought up in Amazing Mirror, I think there's potential for a Metroid-like Kirby idea, but you need to have some actual movement upgrades in it. And that's definitely more of where Amazing Mirror takes itself, even with how it uses its abilities. Great Cave is basically just a glorified scavenger hunt at the end of the day. It's cute, it's got some fun little ideas here, and I like the boss fights in it. But if there's any part of the game I dread revisiting just because it's not as interesting, it is Great Cave for me. I have had several playthroughs where I just forego getting 100% and just kind of rush through the entire zone, meaning I only do 3 of the bosses to begin with. Which, in some regards, is a shame, but oh well. The fact that this is the only one of the 6 main mini-campaigns I could say I don't like, though, is pretty impressive in its own right. So at the end of the day, it's like the one blemish on an otherwise really good package. And from memory, I want to say this is the longest individual mode we do in this entire LP. Because I don't remember any of the future ones taking upwards of 3 whole parts on their own. There's maybe one that could, but I handled that one a little differently to begin with anyway. We're only a third of the way done with the LP period, though. We got a lot of stuff left to cover. There is a lot of stuff in Superstar, and Superstar Ultra even more so. There's really only one thing I don't show off in the entire LP, and I'll cover what that is in specific once we reach the 9th mini-campaign? 8th? I forget which one it is. It's one of the ones they added for Ultra all the same. Like I mentioned earlier in Great Cave Offensive, if you manage to finish them all without collecting any treasure chests, the game gives you a message going, you didn't find a single one. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, we get a little congratulations screen after this weird kind of fake credit screen, saying congratulations for getting all 60 of them. I do find it a little weird that they just didn't make one of them have a value of 9G, so it's a straight line of 9s, but oh well. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 6, we're moving on to mini-campaign number 5. See you guys then.